You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey everybody, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Friday. I almost slid into a Pete there, didn't it? What? I mean, it was almost Pete adjacent there. Brian Kamenetzky and Andy
Starts getting the
Kamenetzky.
copyright infringement.
No, I don't, and I am not going to do that because Pete and his fans could have me killed.
Oh yeah,
I think we all know that. It's very powerful. A lot we want to get into.
He's had a lot of people killed.
And probably, well, but only bad people. Because right. Pete is somebody who uses his power for good.
Or just people that looked at Pete sideways. One or the other.
Well, those are bad people.
Yes.
And they deserved it. And they know what they did. So one of the things that Andy and I, we've talked about since the season has ended is we want to get a lot of different voices onto the show, talk about the season, talk about what the heck happened and what Lakers fans ought to look forward to for next season. It's something we're starting today with Alex Regla. Covers the Lakers for Newsbreak. Just started that job, so congratulations. Also podcasts for Silver Screen and Roll on Tuesdays, so you can listen to him.
Taco Tuesday.
That's right. You can listen to him with our friends Harrison and Anthony over there at the Silver Screen and Roll. Before we get to Alex, I want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Michelob Ultra at only 2.6 carbs and 95 calories. It's only worth it if you enjoy it. Stay tuned for the Ultra Moment segment coming up later in the episode. Alex, thanks so much for coming on, man. We really appreciate it. It's nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you guys. I said it off air, but big fan of you guys. Big fan of what you guys have always done covering the Lakers. So this is exciting for me. I'm really excited.
Don't waste that off air. It's important to say all the nice things when people can hear it too. You, of course, Andy and I really appreciated and actually cited a few times on the show some of the stats and the data that you were putting up throughout the playoffs and the stretch run and the work you were doing over at Silver Screen and Roll. And so we're excited to have you on. And we actually want to start in a place that we've talked a lot about and that you just wrote about, the Lakers' inability to make a basket, particularly a three-point basket in the playoffs. How bad was it?
It was bad. It's funny. It's like usually when you look at numbers, you need that context of like film, right? But this was one of the instances where you just need to watch like one game and you figure out like, yeah, this shooting is just broken. It's not working. And the numbers aren't pretty. I think, and like the disappointing part was they got good looks. I think that was the biggest thing fans need to realize was, I think I looked it up and the Lakers took 23 more wide open threes than the Suns did in the series. So they got probably better quality looks than the Suns, but they just couldn't convert. And like individually, like a guy like Kuzma and a guy like KCP, two of the guys you would count on to make those shots, they were combined 2 for 22 on those shots. So yeah, there was enough poor shooting there it wasn't going to work. And the Suns didn't even shoot that well either, but they at least were about average. And that's all it took.
Well, the Lakers were not a great three-point shooting team on the season this year. And, frankly, they weren't a great one last year when they won the championship, saved the bubble. But this year in the playoffs, I mean, it really fell off a cliff. In examining the numbers, looking back at some of these games or whatever, did you get any thoughts on just why it was happening like to this extreme a level?
It was tough because, Rob Pelinka mentioned it in the exit interviews. He mentioned that the fact that LeBron and AD not being healthy or not being on the floor, that type of kind of shot creation was an issue, but which is true. Like, obviously, if LeBron's hurt and AD's hurt, that's going to kind of manipulate how the defense treats those guys and how much they cheat off those guys and stuff like that.
Well, and in theory, though, Alex, not to interrupt you, but it should have, to some degree, made it easier because nobody was getting guarded.
I was just going to say, but when I said the stat, like they got 23 more wide open threes, that kind of goes against that. So like, no matter how hurt and LeBron and AD are, like having wide open shots, should it make a difference? So in theory, no, like there's really no reason outside of maybe tired legs. One of the people who read the article mentioned that in the comments. I think that's a really good point. Maybe playing in the bubble and playing the whole season and having to play more minutes than usual with LeBron and AD being out, having to shoulder more offensive like load, like a guy like Dennis Schroeder, Kuzma, like maybe by the time they got to the playoffs, the legs were just shot. So that's one theory I've heard.
That's, you know what, and that's an interesting way of looking at it, Alex, because I mean, and one that I hadn't thought about, because you go look, Caruso, KCP, you know, the Lakers were never better this season shooting than they were in the first like 3 weeks of the season. Yeah, that's why, I mean, obviously it wasn't sustainable. Nobody expected Caruso to shoot like 68% for the entire year, and KCP was well over 50, and everybody was really knocking down threes except for Anthony Davis. But they also never were fresher than they were at that moment. Like it was only sort of downhill from there. I remember thinking when Pelinka said that, like they got so many wide open shots. The spacing wasn't any different in that regard. Were there, so I wasn't buying what he was selling there. When you go back and you look at it, is this something that you think is fixable, relatively speaking, with the same personnel, or do they really need to go out and find better shooters this offseason?
It's tough because, like, again, people in the comments have said, well, like, what do you propose they do? And it is hard. You can't just say go get shooters, because they've kind of done that the past 2 seasons. They've got Danny Green, they got Wesley Matthews, they got Quinn Cook. Like, they've got guys who are capable of shooting. The thing is, once they put a Laker uniform on, it just vanishes. I'm not sure what. A friend at Silver Screen and Roll, Ollie, wrote a really good piece about like the last 10 or 15 years of just Laker shooters coming to the Lakers, and then percentages just drop. And I don't know. I don't know if there's a curse.
That was first of all, he did a great job just breaking down theories. Like, if I remember correctly, including stuff like the lighting inside Staples Center.
Staples is one of the two. It's MSG,
right,
and Staples Center that use that theater lighting where
it looks awesome.
Court, it's fantastic, but the court is lit and the stands are not. So it is different. I wonder if the same thing happens at Madison Square. It's hard to know with the Knicks because they have been so bad for so long that they can miss shots for all sorts of reasons. But it's an interesting theory.
Yeah, and like just going back and watching, and as I was watching live, the other biggest thing that kind of stood out was guys just getting really too hesitant. We saw so many times where they just passed up open looks, and I think that speaks to the confidence. Like if you're open but you're not confident, I'm not sure how likely you are going to make that shot. And we saw so many times like this goes up and down the roster where LeBron at one point had to yell at KCP on the sideline, like, you got to shoot that ball if you're open. So maybe that played a role. Like maybe just getting into a cold stretch kind of messed with their confidence. Again, I'm kind of grasping at straws here. At the end of the day, they got open looks and they got to make those shots.
I wonder too, I was thinking about, because the reasons like you're getting at, Alex, are pretty ethereal and hard to figure out what exactly was going on. But I was wondering if maybe it could come down to, at least at times, the way players are specifically being used. Like somebody like Wes Matthews didn't start this year. I thought he would be, actually, when they signed him. I thought he was going to be part of a starting lineup of LeBron, AD, KCP, West, Gasol. And the reason I bring that up is if you look at his career splits, the difference between his three-point averages as a starter versus a reserve are really stark. Like he's something like 38% on his career as a starter, 33% as a reserve. So, and some guys just don't play well off the bench.
And importantly, has not been a reserve for most of his career.
Right. And, some guys adjust to that very slowly, particularly in a year like this one, where there was so much chaos, so little practice time. You wonder if maybe one of the things the front office has to do in thinking about this is, beyond the players they choose, really start thinking about how they're actually using them in the combinations.
That makes sense. And it's just sparing. Like, it wasn't just a Wesley Matthews just coming off the bench. He wasn't used for a couple of games at a time, where either he was dealing with an injury or COVID stuff or whatever. But like that messes up players' rhythm also. And I think maybe not being used consistently, especially for like a veteran player like Wesley Matthews, you would think he needs to get his legs back underneath him, because he was one of the guys who did mention in the exit interviews that having not a full off season to get ready kind of impacted his game. So because they didn't go out and get young players. They got veterans. And I think veterans are really strict in terms of their off-season routines and getting ready for the season. So maybe, that can mess with the player's rhythm. The only guy who really didn't get impacted was Marc Gasol. Like, he didn't play, and then he would come in and still make threes. So It's crazy that the
But he spent the first half of the
it
season not
didn't
shooting
shoot
any,
them.
though.
Right. You only,
Yeah.
you taking, hitting a solid percentage on one a game isn't that
Volume.
helpful. He did get more aggressive, I think, as his playing time was taken away by Andre Drummond. So in that sense, it was good. Something he talked about at his exit interview, just sort of being spurred on by the competition. For the record, Andy, you are correct. 740 games as a starter for Wes Matthews. 38% from 3-point range, 109 games as a reserve, many of them coming this year.
I don't think that's
33.2%. So no, it's not crazy. All right, let's talk more about the offense, because it wasn't just a 3-point shooting problem the Lakers had. They weren't a great 3-point shooting team last year and managed to have, at least pre-bubble, a much better offense than they did this year. It's something else that the Lakers need to figure out. What happened this season with the offense? Was it just the injuries, or was there something deeper? We'll talk about that next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Michelob Ultra. It's time for this week's Ultra Moment. There's going to be a lot of time for us to look back on the season itself, but this week, I'm going to choose to look at LeBron changing his jersey from 23 to 6. Obviously, there's the rather unsubtle tie-in to the new Space Jam movie coming up. LeBron is in serious promotion mode right now, and hopefully the movie's going to be fun and exciting. But at the risk of spoiling the movie, I'm pretty sure the Toon Squad's going to win this game, Alex. That's the way I've pictured this shaking out. We're going to see
maybe
LeBron.
Not the director's cut. I want to see
Snyder cut.
in the book, The Natural, Roy Hobbs strikes out at the end. He does not hit a home run.
The Werner Herzog director's cut, you're going to see LeBron lose. But the Toon Squad's going to win the game. We're going to see LeBron dominate, which is hopefully what we're going to see next season after a long summer. Looking forward to seeing the joy, happiness, passion that was a trademark of the 2020 championship team. Remember, it's only worth it if you enjoy it. 2.6 carbs, 95 calories. Joy creates success. Enjoyment isn't the end game. It's the whole game.
All right, Alex Regla with us today on the Locked On Lakers podcast. Of course, you know him from his podcast at Silver Screen and Roll, and also with his new gig at Newsbreak, covering the Lakers there. You wrote about the 3-point shooting. Obviously, Alex, the problems with the Lakers extended offensively beyond that this year. Last year, they were not great offensively, but they still were 11th when it was all said and done in terms of offensive efficiency. And most of that drop actually came in the bubble. Like they were like a top 6 or 7 team going into the bubble. And in those 8 bubble games were so bad offensively, their efficiency dropped out of the top 10. This year, they were 24th. Do you pin that on the injuries, or do you pin that on something else, in terms of personnel, in terms of Frank Vogel's coaching style, or kind of some combination of all of that?
It's a bit of a cop-out, but yeah, I think it's a combination of everything. I think when you have LeBron James on your team, I think even the greatest tactician coach out there, it's not going to make a difference. Like, he's your half-court offense, right? You're not going to really have LeBron play within a system. So even if you have, I don't know, the best coach out there,
LeBron James
is the system. Yeah. So the thing was last year, like you said, even last year, they weren't a good half-court team. What they were good at was being a really good transition team. Mm-hmm. And again, I think a lot of that depends on having a guy like AD, like healthy, who can grab and go, who can just run the court and beat his guy down the court, having LeBron do that as well. Not having those two guys and relying on everyone else to create their own offense. When you look around the roster, I mean, outside of maybe Dennis Schroeder, really you don't have a guy who can consistently do that. So those numbers that's just what they are. But they just weren't, like you said, it wasn't just 3-point shooting. Their percentage on the rim dropped. Their mid-range shooting is horrible this year. Like, people don't talk about that a lot. Like, the 3-point shooting was really bad in the playoffs. Their mid-range shooting was maybe even worse. Like, it was really bad. So they're just not a good offensive team, I would say. They generate easy, but they make up for it. They generate easy looks. They get to the free throw line a ton. That helps. They do put pressure on the rim, but again, if you don't have LeBron or AD, that kind of advantage, that math advantage to kind of balance everything else out, it drops, and that's tough.
Yeah, look, their percentages without those guys in the lineup, you're right. I mean, the guys who are left over, that is not a good NBA team. It is not a team that you would expect to win. And quite frankly, was surprised they won as much as they did. And Andy and I were having conversations about Frank Vogel in terms of like, he needs to get more attention and more coach of the year love, because they're still the best defensive team in the league. And look at their roster. It's terrible. Like, it's not terrible when you put LeBron and AD and let everybody fall into their role. Obviously 21-7 and so on and so on and so on. But when they're not there, these are role players who are not designed to lead a team, and yet they're winning more games than you would think. Andy and I have talked a lot about the personnel choices that they've made, and the center position obviously always comes up. Most of the attention that was paid here was to rim protection and people yelling about Marc Gasol and yelling they need more, and then they get Andre Drummond and they hate him, and it's bring back Marc Gasol and all this other stuff.
You weren't happy with Trez either.
No,
nobody
liked anything.
Nobody was happy with anybody other than AD, who doesn't want to play center.
Well, but you said are usually not happy.
No,
that
you
is
said
true.
Two things though that I think are interesting in terms of talking about the offense, and it was how you finish in transition and
putting pressure on the rim.
Yes. Yeah. Getting at the rim. Thank you. So that includes lobs. It includes finishes on the pick and roll. Thank you, Andy. How much of do you think the change in the offense, losing 6 to 8 points a game, whatever it is, doing that stuff, is related to personnel choices that they made? Is that one of the places to look?
That's a good point. Like, everybody kind of pointed to the changes in the center position as like defensively, right? Like they're not long or athletic. They're more positional defenders. Like Marc Gasol is an awesome defender, but he doesn't do it like a guy like Dwight or JaVale does it. They're all effective, just they do it differently. And I guess the same goes for the offense. Like Gasol's not a lob threat, obviously. Harrell's not really a lob threat either for his small size. Drummond technically is a lob threat. He's just not a good finisher on the rim.
He'd have to be able to catch.
And catch the ball. Big part of that. So yeah, that's a good point. That vertical aspect of their game was taken away. They're a very horizontal team this year. They're kind of straight line going to the rim. When they had like, again, I didn't like the whole Damian Jones versus Drummond debate on there, but
well, it's because it's not fair to Drummond, because Damian Jones is the greatest Laker of all time.
That's true. The fact. But Jones at least kind of represented that different kind of calculus out there, that you had that kind of air threat, that lob threat. And I'm not saying if they had him, anything would be different, but I think there probably will be changes in that personnel next year where they at least have a different look. I think that's really important with centers. They can't all be the same. You have to have a little variance in them. And that's why I was kind of high on the center position this year. I thought there was kind of some fun variance, but it never worked out.
It's interesting. First of all, I was looking at some cleaning the glass numbers today, and their numbers in transition this year versus last year fell off a damn cliff. Like it is shocking for all the attention that rightly and understandably was there about the outside shooting. Their number one strength plummeted this year versus last year. But I was also thinking about Anthony Davis and with the outside shooting in general, but just the offense. Like this year, his outside shooting was terrible. It was 26%. And that's, it's off his career averages. But the truth is, he's never been above 34% for a regular season. And outside of that one great stretch in the bubble, he's never been good from three in the playoffs either. And it's made me wonder if they need to rethink how he's used in general, but also how he's operating in space and how they look to use him further from the basket, because he obviously has perimeter skills. But the truth is, outside shooting isn't the best part of his game. And I just wonder if, for all the talk about him needing to be closer to the basket, or, what happens if Drummond's there, or why won't he play center? I don't even know if it matters so much what positions he's at, but I do think they need to be thinking about more ways to just get him closer to the basket, no matter how. I think he's in some ways thought of as more of a perimeter scorer than he actually really is.
Yeah, I was nodding my head like a lot there, because I agree with everything, and that's something I've written about in the past.
That is why Andy wanted to have you on the show.
Yes,
because that
validate me, Alex. Validation.
Yeah, literally all that. I'll try to get to all that, but it's not just like how they're using him. I think there is a mindset change that needs to be there for AD. Obviously, like, people get on Drummond. Like I find myself defending Drummond even if I don't want to, when it comes to him and AD sharing the front court, because at some point, like, it doesn't matter who's down there. If AD wants to get to the rim, he's going to get to the rim. Maybe some of that was the health Maybe he didn't have that burst to kind of pass by his guys like he did in the bubble. But for the most part in the season, I think he had like career low shots at the rim in terms of percentage wise, in terms of his shot frequency. Maybe that great shooting stretch in the bubble kind of messed with his mindset, where he's like, I'm just KD now. I can just make these whenever I want. So I'm going to do that. But yeah, like even with Gasol out there, like usually Davis is the guy who's kind of playing the stretch role or something. So there is obviously tinkering that needs to be done, but we've kind of said the same thing since last year. Like nothing even really changed in the bubble. Like the reason they won was because he just started making his shots from the outside. So, I mean, eventually, yeah, it'd be cool if he did more pick and roll and he was the dive man. He played the 5. He just got to the rim a lot more, but I don't think that's really in his game at this point.
Okay, actually, when we get to the next segment, I speaking of AD and the way he's used and, center versus power forward, all that stuff, I have a theory that we talked about on Thursday's podcast that I want to ask you about, because it was something that popped into my head recently in terms of the way AD is being used more as a 4 versus a 5 and the school of thought behind it, and whether or not that school of thought may actually be bunk, perhaps nonsense.
It is one of your theories.
Yeah. Well, no, the overarching theory, not my theory. My theory, I think, actually could have validity to it. So we will get into that coming up next. Locked on Lakers brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline, the fastest, easiest way to bet on all your sports action. Baseball season's in full swing. You can track all the action at BetOnline. This week has tons of sports action on the go. Get all the latest news, odds, and info for all your sporting needs, including MLB, NBA, NHL, UFC, MMA. Before the next pitch, head over to BetOnline on your laptop, mobile device. Check out all the great sporting news, sign-up bonuses, contest information. Don't sit on the sidelines anymore. This is your chance to get into the game as teams are neck deep in the playoffs. Head to the website or use your mobile device. Sign up today. Receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit using the promo code LOCKEDON. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts.
Locked on Lakers also brought to you by Built Bar. Andy, if you're like me, you're moving around, you're all day, you're on the move, you're doing stuff. I need to eat stuff. I need to stay fueled. And what I've been doing for like most of the year is I take a ham and I just put it in the front seat of the car and I just leave it there and I just chew on it all day as I'm doing stuff throughout the week. That is not healthy. It's not a good way to do it. You know what I do now?
Looks cool though.
Well, yeah. I mean, people are like, hey, where'd you get that ham? But from a cholesterol standpoint, it's not.
Tell them it's not a ham. It was a person.
You know what I do now? Built Bar. Built Bar is a much better way to
less intimidating, but more sensible.
Yes. And less likely to spoil. High in protein, low in sugar and calories.
Or get you pulled over.
and improved Built Bar, even more delicious than before. 18 flavors, Alex, 18, including 6 new ones like caramel brownie, cookies, and cream. 100% chocolate, that's what they're coated in. They're soft, they're easy to chew, unlike most protein bars. So, Alex, go to BuiltBar.com and use the promo code LOCKED15. What's that promo code, Alex?
LOCKED15.
Very good. And you get 15% off your next order. Use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com.
Thought you were going to announce a ham-flavored Built Bar. Really exciting.
We'll see. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we haven't been hosting quite long enough that we have that kind of pull over with the Built Bar people. But I will be proposing a 100% chocolate-covered ham flavor at the next board meeting.
I would definitely test that one before going straight to market.
But yeah, if you saw that going down the street, yes, that was me nourishing myself with a ham.
There you go.
That might have been in the car for 3 or 4 days at that point.
Today on the road to the finals, our NBA playoffs coverage brought to you by Michelob Ultra. It's only worth it if you enjoy it at 2.6 carbs, 95 calories. We can all enjoy the games a little more this season.
Yeah, so Alex, would have more than 95 calories?
That ham.
That's exactly right.
There's this school of thought with Anthony Davis and his resistance to playing the 5 that we know about because he's been on the record about it, and the moves that the Lakers have made have very much reflected that. That's actually gone on, by the way, when he was in New Orleans as well. But one of the schools of thought is he doesn't want to be playing the center position because he'll be going up against larger opponents, banging on the body, and it wears him down, particularly as an injury-prone player. So you're looking to prevent that from happening. But I was actually wondering, when you take a look at some of the injuries that AD has had and the way the modern game is played now and so spread out, that as a perimeter player at his size, could Anthony Davis actually be leaving himself more susceptible to injury with that preference? Like I was wondering if that could be possible. I just wanted to run that past you.
Do you mean in terms of like what
the effect on his body?
Because he's running, it's less physical banging with guys,
but he's running.
But there's so few players
over.
who do that. You're moving around more. I don't really buy his theory, but I'm wondering if you do.
You know what's funny, because like when on defense specifically, like the role AD plays, he's more of like a help defender. He's like a super help defender, right? Where he is using a lot of his energy to kind of like close out on the 3-point line and then scramble back and then offer rim protection. There is like, what if he would just kind of sit in the post and kind of just like do the Dwight Javale thing where he just needs to kind of hold his own and then contest a shot versus doing all these crazy rotations? That could be a thing. Like I wouldn't doubt it. And like I was like, as you were saying that, I was trying to think in like my head, how many centers out there really are really true low post threats that are going to like just bulldoze through him, like maybe Jokic, Embiid. Not that many others that I don't think AD couldn't hold his own with. I think, again, it's just preference. And that's the thing with AD since he's joined the Lakers in his career. Like he has these preferences. Some aren't optimal to like maybe his own well-being and to the team. Like he can be used better. But that's just kind of like what you're signed up for with AD.
All I heard was, yeah, that could be a thing, Brian. Dumbass.
Yeah, I think, too, the other thing that I think is important that I see with him, because you said in the last segment, I think you're exactly right. Like when he wants to, games 2 and 3, he got to the rim plenty. He put the ball on the floor and he finished there. And Andre Drummond played a good game and was not in the way when Davis was completely engaged. Now, look, he hit a couple outside shots too, but that's always going to be part of Davis's game. The thing that I think gets him in trouble is when he doesn't go quickly. Because AD is a really smart player. I think he wants to be seen as a complete player, a good passer. He plays with LeBron, who always knows how to pass out of the double, does that well. And I think where he gets into trouble, he being Davis, is when he gets too deliberate, when he feels the double coming and he's kind of waiting for it. He wants to make the defense commit and all that kind of stuff. And it slows him down. And then it puts him in decisions to read defenses and all that, which he is good at, but not great at. And meanwhile, if you're the opposition and you're kind of defending him in a way that takes the ball out of his hands. So I just think he's at his best, regardless of where he is on the floor or regardless of who's playing with him, when he gets it and goes aggressively to something, whether that's a cut, whether, a pass, whether that's putting the ball on the floor, whether that's turn and shoot. I just think he gets into trouble when he's too deliberate, trying to quote unquote make the best play.
Yeah, he waits for the play to develop way too much. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
And I think his best games, like just traditionally, like since he's been a Laker, like I think it might have been against Minnesota, his first year where he had like a 40 or 50-point game, is because he gets to the free throw line so much. Yes. And I think he gets to the free throw line so much because he does create those initial advantages, like when he just catches and goes, or like when he's just going aggressive to the rim. Like he gets to the line a lot, and those are his best games. It's the games where he kind of like turns, waits 4 or 5 seconds, a crowd comes, he gets kind of like stressed out. He either throws it away, hits a guy, or tries to hit it like a pull-up. And if he's not going to the line or creating that rhythm, his outside shot's just not going to be there. I think getting to the line for AD is paramount. I think when he gets to the line, makes his shots, he starts to feel good. His jumper looks better. Mm-hmm. And but I think a lot of that is dictated by, like what you said, he has to be aggressive. He has to kind of not wait and just say, I'm getting to the rim. I don't care who's there. I'm going to catch, turn, and go. And not many players can stop AD.
Statistically, that was such a huge, early in the season, particularly between his offense last year and his offense this year, was the fact that he just, forget missing a lot of free throws, which he did. Mm-hmm. He wasn't taking as many either. And that was problematic as well.
Yeah, there are players who can be a little, too head down. AD could use a little more, put your head down, go to the basket, just as an instinct.
I'm Anthony bleeping Davis. Stop me. Just that. Before we let you go, we want to talk about one more thing. Andy and I had a conversation that got a lot of response from people about the championship window the Lakers have. And it is obviously still open. If LeBron James and Anthony Davis are healthy this year, that team certainly finishes in the top 2 or 3 in the Western Conference. They're probably still playing right now. If for no other reason, they probably don't play Phoenix in the first round. And even if Davis, they do get hurt, if Davis isn't hurt in that series, I think Andy and I both think they win, and they were up 2-1. Alex, you think they win that series?
I still think they win. And it's hard to say that with the Suns playing so well right now.
Sure, but they were up 2-1. I mean,
yeah.
And so I don't think that's homerism necessarily. But I will say, to me at least, it looks like, it's hard to say the Lakers are going to get better. LeBron isn't going to get better. AD may ascend a little bit in terms of his skill set, but is probably as fully developed as now. Look, like that's still incredibly good and maybe enough to win titles if those guys are healthy and you put the right supporting cast around. But Phoenix, you can argue, is ascending. They've got Chris Paul and 3 guys under 25 who all still should get better. One of which, Devin Booker, could be a future MVP candidate. Denver has, Jokic is 26, I think, 27, something like that. Maybe, I don't think he's much older than that.
I think
and
he's
then 26. Michael Porter Jr. Is ascending. Jamal Murray is hopefully comes back from his injury and at least is as good as he was before. It was a player under 25. And Jokic still has room to get better. I wonder if the window for the Lakers could be being pulled down by the competition around the league a little bit faster than I expected. I'm wondering if you have the same thoughts about that, Alex.
It's tough. We didn't again. It's hard to just keep going back to injuries, but we don't know exactly how the Lakers would have fared healthy against some of these teams. I think there will be some improvement from Phoenix. Just their young guys getting a little older. Denver, again, like you said, Jamal Murray being healthy and then having Aaron Gordon there for a full season should be good. But it's tough to kind of gauge if the Lakers don't stack up well against them, because we don't know how they stack up when they're not healthy without AD or LeBron out there. But at the same time, and this is something I read about in that piece, I don't think we should just totally use injuries and bad luck as a crutch the way they approach this offseason. They should have the mindset, we need to get better. And just staying pat and saying, oh, well, they'll get healthy, we'll be fine. What if one of them gets hurt again and they're stuck in the same spot or they're missing shots again? Just having those two don't fix everything. They fix a lot, but they don't fix everything. So I don't think the front office should just be content with just, we have LeBron AD, that's it. Because like I said, other teams are getting better. I didn't think Phoenix was going to be this good, this quick.
Nope.
And it's not linear. Maybe Phoenix takes a step back next year, but
Memphis is only going to get better. Utah isn't going anywhere soon, no matter.
And it's also too, it's Memphis internal improvement. But they've got some assets. You look down at some of these other teams, that might be, New Orleans with Zion. I know they didn't make the playoffs; they didn't really even come that close. But they've got a ton of assets and might only be 1 or 2 moves away from suddenly vaulting, doing what Phoenix did, and putting themselves in contention. And meanwhile, you still have the Clippers, who aren't theoretically going anywhere. Dallas with Luka, who's getting better, and they can make that team better. And then the Eastern Conference, the big 3 of Brooklyn, and I mean, it's really brutal out there. And I think it just puts an onus on next year. And if you got to do something aggressive, that's not stupid, but maybe takes away from 2 or 3 years down the road to improve your chances to win next year, I think you do it if you're Rob Pelinka.
I was going to say, have you guys brainstormed any possible ideas? Because that's something I've been thinking as well. The Lowry thing obviously came and passed, but
Alex, we got to pace ourselves, man. It's a
very long off season. Is the answer? Have we thought about it? Yes. Are we going to tell people our thoughts now? Absolutely not.
It's June 11th, man. We're not giving away that.
No. And in fact, shame on you for even suggesting it.
I'm just trying to get podcast ideas.
Yeah, you got a lot to learn about this industry.
We're done here, Alex. That's it.
Got it.
Alex Regla, that was mostly excellent. Thank you for coming on. Of course, he covers the Lakers for Newsbreak at Newsbreak app. Go check out his stuff there. Follow him on Twitter at Alex M. Regla. He also podcasts for Silver Screen and Roll on Tuesdays with Harrison and Anthony. Again, thanks so much for coming on, man. We really appreciate it. This was fun.
Thank you guys. Big fans of you guys. This was an honor. Thank you.
Perfect. All right, well, that is you made up for it. We'll see everybody on Monday.